Okay, we're back with Christa Moore, sociologist at UVA-Wise. One of the things that I'm really interested in, and Christa is too, is the impact of poverty on people. Me from a historical standpoint, but Christa, being a sociologist, she probably sees it much more directly and actively than I do. Christa, you taught an Intro to Poverty Studies course in the spring. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what the experience was?
Yeah, first of all, it was an amazing experience, not just to teach that material to students who are really interested in learning more about poverty because of the various fields they want to go into, but also it was my first opportunity to co-teach here at UVA-Wise, and I co-taught the course with Anthony Cascio from philosophy. And I think that our dynamic, learning together, teaching it from an interdisciplinary approach, was part of what really made it an engaging teaching experience, as well as a more engaging learning experience for the students. Because, I mean, in reality, teaching poverty is really challenging and difficult. It's a crushing reality of the world that we live in. It's hard to talk about because it just is. It can be really depressing to think about the
I,
experience
you
of
know,
the family.
it can be really depressing, but and at the same time, you start wondering if you might be, really maybe exposing some of your students who are living in the midst of this. When you start talking about poor living conditions, and you kind of see them kind of go off in their own little world, wondering if their conditions actually qualify as poor living conditions.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and that's the risk you always take, I think, when you talk about poverty in the classroom is, are students going to just kind of shut down and zone out because it is too hard a reality to talk about and face. But the sociologist in me tells me that when things are challenging or difficult to talk about, it's even more important that we talk about them.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Everybody kind of becomes introspective when you start talking about things like that, and it's not always comfortable. It'd be nice if it were, but it isn't. How many students did you have in there, and how do you think the students felt about the class?
We had approximately 10 students in the class, which we felt like was a good number for the first go around with this course. Um, you know, every class and every conversation sort of vacillated between deep and passionate interest to, oh, wow, I never thought about that before. And then just really getting into the dynamics of what could be going on there, especially because we took an interdisciplinary perspective. So uh, Anthony and I kind of ping-ponged leading the course from our various perspectives, but then we also invited in guest speakers. And so we had several speakers from the college come and talk about poverty from their discipline. And so, we were able to think about what this looks like from economics and communication and literature. And we had a historian, Tom Costa, come in. Well, he didn't get to come in because, we were in pandemic conditions by that time, but he did share a talk with us through a PowerPoint. So the students, I think, were really engaged in seeing that larger, more comprehensive view of poverty.
Well, and for those out there watching this, this Intro to Poverty Studies course is new because we have become members of the Shepherd Higher Education Consortium on Poverty. And one of the things the Higher Education Consortium on Poverty does is it acts as a network for summer internships. And one of the requirements for getting a summer internship is to take an Intro to Poverty Studies course, which is the whole purpose here. And we were going to try to find interns for this summer. However, the pandemic shut everything down.
Right.
But it's a really great program. One of the things, and it has a website. So if anybody's out there and they're interested, check them out. We are members with a lot of really influential schools. But one of the things about us is we are one of the few schools that is A, rural, and B, in the midst of an impoverished region. So it's my hope that as we send our students to urban areas, to suburban areas, to work on poverty focused programs, that these other schools find an opportunity to send their students to us to learn about rural poverty and poverty in like an extractive economy and things like that. Things that when you take a look through those that list of schools, that you don't necessarily see a lot of schools like us. So I'm really hoping that eventually we start seeing a lot of those students showing up in Wise County, and we're able to kind of work with them during the summers too.
I hope so too. And I think one of the things that makes UVA Wise unique is that we also have so many first generation students who are coming from within this Appalachian region. And so, many of them have grown up in the very conditions that we're talking about that, impact not just this area, but the world at large, this culture of poverty,
Yeah.
which when you grow up in it can become so normalized.
Yeah.
Yet there's still this really unconscious level of awareness, sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious level of awareness, because poverty is so like relative.
When I was a kid, we all smoked cigarettes when we were like 13 or 14 years old. And at this point in my life, if I saw a 13-year-old smoking a cigarette, I'd probably slap him in the back of the head. But that it's normal. I mean, everybody I knew smoked cigarettes when they were 13 years old. But now you don't go to Beverly Hills and see 13-year-olds walking down the street with no shirts on smoking cigarettes.
Right.
It's a culture of poverty. It's kind of what you do because that's what everybody has always done.
That's right. That's right. And so it's just part of every aspect of your life, your family, your friends, your schoolmates, your school. It's just your life.
And sometimes that gets difficult because, it's really difficult to escape poverty while remaining within it. And I think we see that in, a lot of different manifestations. You have people wanting to remain part of their community, but yet wanting to go beyond what the community has traditionally permitted. And that's going to be tough for local kids too, to go get a college degree, to become a professional, yet remain a member of a church that doesn't necessarily focus in on getting college degrees and becoming a professional and being a higher level thinker or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that idea that you can't go home again, right? Like when you see those larger parts of the world, the bigger ideas, when poor students in particular come to college and then they like gain that insight, which is, a different type of richness or privilege, I guess, compared to, how reclusive poverty can be and insular, right? Then it's really interesting transformation to watch and to be a part of. It's one that I went through myself.
Yeah, and one of the things I've seen is particularly if kids grow up within a family that doesn't really have a lot of experience outside of what would be normal in their community, and that kid goes off and does a variety of things. Sometimes the family doesn't necessarily know what to do with that kid anymore. Is it the same person or is it a completely different person? And we see students like that all the time, and they struggle during their college years because they are trying to do all the things we're hoping that they'll do. Yet when they get home, mom and dad or grandpa, they just don't quite get why they're wasting their time doing these things when, there's a perfectly good job at Walmart waiting for you, things like that.
Yeah, it's all types of cognitive dissonance,
Yeah.
right? When you come from an area that's poverty stricken and then you get to experience something different, and you're right, and then you go home again and it's something has disconnected.
Yeah, I think that's, I know I see it with our students an awful lot.
Mhm.
And I kind of worry about that. Generally, I think those things work themselves out one way or the other. But when you're 19 or 20 or 21, it's much more serious than just trying to take a chill pill and waiting a little while for it to figure itself out.
Mhm.
Um, How have you found the region so far? Is it what you expected? Is it better than you expected? Is it something that you're really happy you're here because what you do is kind of really important here?
Mhm. I really like that area because I like the culture of the area. I like the resilience and the passion of the people who live in this area. And like I said, it also reminds me quite a bit of where I grew up in Kentucky, which didn't have the beautiful mountain terrain. Um, I lived in horse country, so our beauty was these pastoral fields, filled with horses. But the people here are just amazing, and when you work with people and you make that like your career, the focus of your research, um, the mission of your life, right, to help communities and families to become stronger and to be more prosperous and to live more enriching lives themselves and to give that to their children, it can be so rewarding. Yes, it's challenging, and when you meet people who struggle, you struggle along with them, and it hurts and it's emotional. But again, that's how we grow. It's working through that adversity.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, as a native of the region, I guess it's always surrounded me, and I've always kind of seen it. But you get insulated a bit because you see it every day and you don't really recognize it. It's sort of like standing in the middle of a forest and you
mhm,
realize, that you're seeing a lot of trees. You're just not seeing the entire forest.
mhm. Yeah,
Now,
and go ahead.
well, I was just gonna ask, um, where you grew up and compared to here, um, is the poverty level kind of similar? The same kinds of challenges we have here. We have a lot of prescription addiction problems, things like that. Are
Mhm.
those kinds of problems present, like in central Kentucky where you came from?
Yeah, those same dynamics are present. And one of the most interesting things about the area and also about just the focus of my research is that where I'm from in Kentucky and then this part of Virginia, there are what are called in social work these comorbid issues that you often find like that work together and reinforce each other. So poverty works to reinforce, unemployment and lack of opportunity, which works to reinforce things like, um, poor decision making, sometimes drug use, sometimes domestic violence, sometimes a combination of the two, which, if there are children in the home, can then, influence parenting practices and the potential for risk and child maltreatment. And so, poverty is so much a part of that equation because within the family you might lack the skills because you never learned to do anything differently, but then within the area or within the community, perhaps poverty has impacted or restricted the types of resources a community can offer to those families within themselves. And so, poverty is a big piece of this conversation when you think about the ways that communities and families function.
Yeah, I think we've always known how important it was. But one of the things that always struck me is that people sometimes seemed surprised by their own poverty.
Mhm.
Sometimes people who are obviously impoverished to everyone else, when you have a conversation with them, they don't necessarily view themselves that way. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Mhm. Well, I don't know how much we want to go into this. It might be a basis for another conversation at a later time, but I think religion plays a big role in combination with poverty, and in, helping people have this real deep level acceptance of their circumstances. Where I am from is also a very religious area of Kentucky. And so religion and poverty often go together and reinforce each other in that way as well, and can also help to like really establish that experience of this is just the normal everyday life that I live within the culture I've grown up in and continue to live in.
That is a really good idea. Maybe what I need to do, is I need to get me, you, and David Rouse together, and all three of us do one of these, because David has taught a lot of religious courses over the years, and really has a philosopher's eye for religion, being trained in religion himself. So maybe that would be a really great one for another time. So we'll see if we can get David in on this at some point. Well, Christa, I've had a great time doing this. I've been wanting to talk to you about what you do, and particularly kind of understand how that poverty course went. I was out of pocket all spring, so I didn't really realize what was going on, or really know how anything turned out. And when I finally got back, I was more concerned about getting my own classes completed than what anybody else was doing. Thank goodness I cleared that hurdle. But Chris, it's been great talking to you. We'll get together with David and see if we can get another segment going here in a few weeks, maybe. I think that would be incredible. And if anybody's interested in Christa's work, just send her an email. She's with the sociology department at UVA-Wise. She's pretty easy to find, and I'm sure she'll be happy to tell you everything you need to know about what she does and what you may be able to do to help. So thank you, Christa. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.